I'll just give you a little introduction. It's about one of my favourite topics, the Great British Bake Off, and there are a few terms and names which are more or less household names in the UK, which you'll probably have heard of, such as Marks and Spencer, John Lewis, shops like that. The names of the judges of the Bake Off, which are Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood, and certain ingredients will be mentioned that you might use in baking and different equipment that you use as well. But I think it's not too technical. There are some figures as well coming up, just to let you know. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, 6 years ago, something happened which changed the UK forever. At 8 p.m. on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday evening, 2.5 million of us in the UK tuned into the first ever episode of a new TV show, which was called The Great British Bake Off. It was a new talent show, if you like, on BBC Two, and we saw 10 contestants lining up with only butter, eggs and flour as their weapons and some wooden spoons, waiting to be invited to start baking. Since that evening, life hasn't been the same in the UK. Although Britain has always been a nation of bakers, we have become a nation obsessed with baking. We bake morning, noon and night. We bake for dinner parties, clubs and office competitions, and we spend a fortune on baking ingredients and kitchen equipment. Our evenings are spent looking at our cookbooks, and the rest of the time we're dreaming about cupcakes, not to mention eating them as well. We even read baking books in bed. We watch baking shows on the television, and this is all part of a national fixation which was started by the Bake Off judges, Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood, both bakers themselves and household names in the UK. Today, the British baking industry is worth £3.4 billion. And we even have a National Baking Week dedicated to the pastime. This is a charity initiative which is designed to get as many Britons as possible making their own cakes. So the next series is about to start this summer, and I think it's a good time to look at the ways in which Bake Off has transformed our lives. Did you know that more than 3/5 of all adults in the UK claim that they have baked at home at least once this year? This is a huge rise. It compares with only 1/3 of adults who baked at home at least once a year in 2011. This is according to a retail analyst called Conlumino. 1/4 of adults even bake once a week. There has been an extremely strong uplift in interest in baking since the beginning of the television series I was talking about before. It's as though the British public have rediscovered the art of baking. It's one of those activities that's both enjoyable and it's really practical as well, because it can save households a lot of money by making something from scratch. And we shouldn't think that it's just women who are whipping up masterpieces in the kitchen. In fact, 2 out of the 3 of the first Bake Off winners were men, and this is inspiring a new generation to break those taboos surrounding male bakers. Baking used to be seen as very much the prerogative of the Women's Institute in the UK, something that middle-aged ladies did, but the Bake Off has changed all that. The show has also sparked an unprecedented boom in sales of baking supplies, whether it's cake tins or miniature thermometers, even mini blowtorches for getting that perfect crispy topping on your creme brulee. The kitchenware shop Lakeland has led the way in this respect. Its annual profits have risen by 1/3 since 2010, and sales of baking equipment have risen by 42%. This is buoyed by the show's success, and the group has even announced plans to open 40 more stores around the UK. Marks and Spencer's and John Lewis have also seen huge rises in sales of baking equipment, with sieves rising 31%, measuring cups rising 98% and sales of whisks 79% in recent years. Because every week customers are inspired to bake what they see being made on the TV. And as well as equipment, it's ingredients too which are flying off the shelves. At one of the major British supermarkets, it was recorded that shoppers are now buying 23,000 kilograms of flour and 15,000 bottles of food colouring every single week. We're also eating a lot more baked goods. Last year we bought 110 million cupcakes collectively, and cakes are now even stocked at high-end department stores and bakery chains. The numbers of bakery chains are multiplying, as well as the numbers of franchises, and cupcakes in particular are extremely popular. They are the snack of choice. In some gourmet cupcake outlets, there can be queues outside the door. And Britain even got its first cupcake vending machine recently, which sells hundreds of treats every day from a bakery in Glasgow in Scotland. So Britain really quite literally started baking its way out of the recession. According to the National Statistics Office, the number of independent bakeries increased by 5% between 2011 and 2012, and one insurance authority received 2,000 requests from cake entrepreneurs for insurance quotes last year. This is an increase of 325% since the bake-off began. So it really seems like owning a baking business is the modern career fantasy of our times. If you search for baking books on Amazon, you'll get about 20,000 different options. So this shows that the bake-off has also had a radical effect on the UK book market. In the first half of this year alone, there were 17 baking cookbooks which sold more than 10,000 copies. In February 2013, the bake-off reached a milestone. The word cake replaced the word chicken as the most searched for word on the BBC Food website. And since the show launched in 2010, Google searches for cake have more than doubled. The number of baking blogs has spiked as well, with tens of thousands more amateurs taking to the web to share their recipes, tips and pictures. We can't escape from it on the television either. We're bombarded by baking programmes, which all attract millions of viewers for every episode, although the Great British Bake Off continues to top them all. Newspapers are seeing the fruits as well. The numbers of column inches devoted to baking have increased exponentially over the past few years. What about on a social level? Well, baking clubs have actually become the new social gathering. Bake Off inspired amateurs are getting together to share their recipes and tips. And it's also become much more popular for restaurants to put cakes back on the menu rather than refined puddings or desserts. The Bake Off has also spawned a new generation of office workers who bake for their colleagues, with some companies even holding baking competitions of their own. And I can tell you that I recently took part in the Great Brussels Bake Off with a team of friends from my local church. We didn't win any prizes, so clearly I still need to refine my baking skills a little bit. And if I wanted to improve my skills, I could certainly take a class. That's what a lot of people have started to do. In fact, this year, 5.2% of British people have taken a lesson in baking, according to one retail analyst. And you can learn all kinds of skills at these classes, from making macaroons to making pastry. There just seems to be an insatiable appetite for learning these skills. And there are all kinds of people who take part in them as well. There have been celebrities, politicians, and even members of the royal family seen and promoting baking. Everyone from David Cameron's wife Samantha to Kate Moss. This humble pastime is no longer as humble as it once was. It's actually very good social etiquette now to serve homemade cakes at an afternoon tea or a dinner party, as opposed to something you buy in a shop. It's also become increasingly popular to have homemade cakes or desserts at a wedding, whereas once you would have ordered your wedding cake from probably a very expensive shop. It's become much more acceptable to give baked goods to people as presents, as this is seen as a very personal and thoughtful gesture. And rather than having dinner parties, people are now opting to host a brunch or a tea where muffins or scones or cakes are the centrepiece, as this gives them an opportunity to show off their baking skills. But our obsession with baking isn't just comforting, it's making us happier as well. The author Marian Keyes described how she was basically saved from depression because of cake. It was baking and enjoying baked goods that really saved her, she says, from this depression. And the surge in interest in baking has led scientists to research the positive health effects of this hobby. According to one American psychiatrist, baked goods make people nostalgic for their childhood, which is maybe one of the reasons why it makes us feel so good. So I hope I haven't made you feel too nostalgic for your childhood, or even too hungry, as you've heard about all of these different kinds of baked goods, but maybe I've inspired you to try your hand yourself at making a scone or a cake later today or this week. Thank you.